I take it with the clock is clicking that you can hear us and see us. And I'm Jerry Moran, United States Senator from Kansas. I'm joined by my colleague, Senator Marshall, a United States Senator from Kansas. And we're happy, we're pleased to be here with you to have a conversation. We are sad and disappointed that we're here for the purpose of talking about an airplane crash that has huge consequences to the lives of many Kansans and certainly to communities across our state and around the country. I was joined last night, I joined Senator Marshall at Reagan National. I was notified of a potential accident a little after 9 p.m., really only not too many minutes after the crash occurred. And both of us spent most of the night and early morning hours at Reagan National, meeting with the rescue workers, the first responders, and meeting at the same time with the mayor of Washington, D.C., the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, who is on his first day on the job, with NTSB officials. I also had a conversation, I think Senator Marshall did too, with Defense Secretary Hegseth, and a number of other government officials, also conversations with the president of American Airlines, and conversations with the mayor and other leaders the mayor of Wichita and other leaders back in Kansas. So we have been together today as well, Senator Marshall and I. We just came from a further briefing with the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, and with NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board. We are, I think, up to date on what those agencies know at the moment, and we were willing to answer your questions and see if we can provide information. Again, we express our sadness, the circumstances that families across the country are in. We're thankful for the efforts to try to save lives last night. But we know that there's a lot of people in our home state that are grieving and sad. And again, we want to do everything we can to make certain that everything done that can be done is done to make sure that flying is and continues to be safe, and that whatever steps need to be taken will be taken by Congress and the administration to make certain that people are safe when they fly and they know that they're safe when they fly. I chair a subcommittee in the Committee on Commerce on Aviation, and we look forward to taking a lead to make sure that those things happen. And I now turn the microphone over to my colleague, Senator Roger Marshall.
Yeah, well, thanks, Senator Moran, and appreciate your leadership and Rob's your prayers. You're both people of faith, and I think for such a time as this, we've been called to lead, and I'm just honored to stand beside you as we wrap our arms around probably over 60 Kansas families, and just mourn with them. I shared last night a scripture, and I'm going to share it again now. I think it's times like this when loss is so overwhelming that we tend to turn to scripture, and this is from the book of Psalms. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. The Lord's close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit, and certainly we're crushed in spirit today. It was one of the longest nights of our lives. Still haven't got to speak to the Kansas families yet, but hopefully they're going to allow us to do that today. I know they're still gathering here from what I understand, flying in, and we'll try to offer our comfort as well. I just want to reassure Kansans that even in this tragedy, God's not deserted us. He walks with us through the darkest valleys, and He weeps with those who weep. And we're praying for strength, comfort, and peace for all those who are mourning today. And again, we just want you to know that we're with you all. I am a little bit of a history buff, and I wanted to know when did we have a tragedy like this in Kansas? And you have to go back to the Udall tornado of 1955, when 75 Kansans died from that tornado. What this really reminds me, and Jerry and I were both younger people, but is the Wichita State airplane crash in 1970. And I think 31 people lost their lives. And growing up in El Dorado, I just remember being loosely part of that Wichita community, but drawing together and mourning with those people. And like we got through it then, we'll get through this as well. So for especially the people of Wichita, and I want to include Congressman Estes. I know he's back there consoling families and doing everything he can as well on his end. I can't spend enough time expressing our concern and prayers. When I said this last night as well, when one life is lost, it's a tragedy, but when many lives are lost simultaneously, in this case, maybe 67 individuals died, it's an unbearable sorrow. It's a heartbreak beyond measure. It's multiplied, and I think as your representatives, we are truly feeling that pain and responsibility. I do want to jump to accountability for a second, and I hope most of you saw President Trump's press conference. I think what you saw there was radical transparency, giving answers, telling you what he knew, exactly what he knew, and I think that's what you can expect from President Trump. On the other hand, we just had a phone call with the National Transportation Safety Board and FAA, and all they would say is, we'll get back to you. And I'm telling Kansans this is unacceptable. I know that Senator Moran on his committee is going to get to the bottom of this. And I do have two large concerns about what transpired here last night. I found out two things of concern. I think the first one is the communication between the air traffic control and the helicopter and the plane. Much like in Butler, Pennsylvania at the president's assassination attempt, the communication is not, there's no communication, direct communication between the civilian and the military helicopter and airplane. Instead, it has to go through air traffic control and then it's relayed rather than an opportunity back and forth. I think my biggest concern, though, is about these transponders. And folks, you're going to learn more about transponders over the next 6 months than you ever cared to learn about. But as I understand it, these transponders should communicate back and forth so one aircraft will know where the other one is, and warnings go off if they get too close. Folks, this is one of the busiest airspace in America. And for some reason, those transponders between this military helicopter and the civilian jet do not communicate with each other. You know, I don't know why they would be allowed in this airspace if they don't communicate with each other. I think it's just set up for failure. Senator Moran knows much more about this transportation and aerospace regulations than I do, but it's not common sense to me. I don't care what type of technology you have. When you have that many planes, that many jets, that many helicopters in the same airspace, I don't know how there's just not set up as a recipe for disaster. I'll be accused of jumping to conclusions, but I want to be radically transparent as well. And I won't rest until the people who lost loved ones on that plane know exactly what happened and why. I've been told, maybe Senator Moran can expand on this, but as I understand it, they've grounded the helicopters in that airspace. And it's safe, I think, to fly in and out of DCA, but I think there's some people that need to be held accountable. Anything else?
I think we'll take their questions.
Great. Thank you so much. Our first question, we're going to go to Leah from Gray Television with a question on congressional action. Leah, you should be good.
Yes, hi. So I have a brief question, a brief follow-up. So first, you mentioned sort of the investigation part that will come about in the following weeks and months. What insight can you give into what that process will look like? What committees, subcommittees, what action can we expect from both the House and Senate in the next few weeks?
Yeah. Well, one of the most important things is to get the report from the National Transportation Safety Board. We've had experiences with them in the past. I've been pleased with their thoroughness. As Senator Marshall indicates, we always need and want answers quickly. But the NTSB is at work. They were at the airport last night. They were, in a sense, staying out of the way of the rescue effort. And they are at work today. And we have met with them and had conversations with the chair of that board on several occasions, maybe 4 or 5 now since last evening. So we're willing to convey what NTSB is doing and what they're finding. But before long, we need to make sure that the Commerce Committee and I chair the subcommittee on aviation in that Commerce Committee, that between the full committee and our subcommittee that we examine not only what NTSB reports, but also have witnesses in front of our committee. And I think that perhaps the unusual thing here for our work is that while we have jurisdiction, the Commerce Committee has jurisdiction over aviation, it's a different committee that has jurisdiction over defense. And so this involves both a civilian aircraft and a military aircraft. But I have no doubt, in fact, will insist that we have the full report, information, and testimony from those at the Department of Defense who are involved in these training missions that were occurring last night at the time the aircraft, the CRJ 700, was attempting to land. So I think hearings, we need to make certain, as I said earlier, that every American is safe to fly. They know they're safe to fly. There is no future of the aviation industry unless that's the case. So we're at work today, we'll be at work tomorrow, and we'll look for those answers and determine whether there's changes that need to occur administratively within the administrative branch of government, the executive branch, and what laws, if any, need to be changed to improve the safety to avoid accidents in the future.
Thank you. And then brief follow-up, Senator Marshall, you had said that you thought President Trump had radical transparency. He also said that he believed diversity was one of the reasons for this crash. Do you agree with that statement?
You know, I have no idea. Certainly, I want air traffic controllers, just like my pilots, to be there because of their merit, not because of anything else. And so I certainly agree with President Trump, and you know, that's what this country was founded on. So I don't know where that comments is coming from.
Great, thank you. We'll now go to the next question. We're going to go to Keith from KWCH. Keith, you should be.
Yes, can you hear me?
Keith, we can hear you. At least I can. Yes.
Okay,
We're good.
Okay, perfect. All right, yeah, we just have a question regarding the American Airlines phone number. We had somebody call us here at the station last night, a family member, they say, of one of the people on that plane. It sounds like it was a little frustrating to get through there, just because of they were on hold for at least 10 minutes, and then when they did get through, the American Airlines representative didn't really know what to do, and that's likely when they needed it the most was last night to get that information. Have you heard any updates on this phone number? Is it working a bit better now? We did try again ourselves and call this morning, and we were still put on hold, and our message was taken.
I know that we've had a caller from Kansas who reached out asking for our help. I think and I just learned that a few minutes ago. We can have a conversation with American Airlines, its CEO, and their personnel, and make sure that the number is a working number, make sure that the personnel who are there answer the phone, and make certain that they have the answers and capability of responding to people's questions. And I can't imagine that the airline wouldn't want to do everything in that regard to make sure that's the case. And we'll follow up with you after we have that conversation with American Airlines and let you know what the response is, so that you have an understanding of that, presumably that the problem has been fixed that you're bringing to our attention.
You know, and if I could add a couple thoughts, is reach out to Senator Moran or my office. If that's happening, we don't, I mean, to be honest, we don't need 10,000 people calling our offices right now to give us different thoughts. But if certainly family members close to the situation, by all means, reach out to our office. And I just want to emphasize that this is the start of the grieving process, and this is going to, you know, it'll take years to recover from this, and we're going to do what we can to work with Congressman Estes to set up some type of grief response back home, as well as up here. I know our chaplain, Black, just does an incredible job of giving us guidance as well. So we're going to meet with him this afternoon, and this is just the start of the process. You know, we've got a long several years here to recover from this.
Thank you. We will now go to Jonathan from Fox 4. Jonathan, you should be good to go ahead.
One of the things that the president said in his press conference was potentially putting blame on the operators of the Black Hawk helicopter. And I'm curious to know if each of you could answer whether you have received any information on whether the operators of that helicopter were partly to blame for the crash.
Yeah. You know, I don't think either one of us are going to sit here and blame anybody. I think that there was a series of errors. I think I'm going to start with air traffic control. One point I didn't mention is why in the world was this helicopter and jet flying at the same altitude at the same time? I'm not a pilot, but I know there's just some basic rules of the air, and they were flying at the same altitude. That should have been corrected long before they even got close to each other. You know, what was the pilot seeing? Was he seeing this plane? Was he seeing another plane? I don't know. But at the end of the day, we lost 67 people, and we want to know.
Thank you. We'll now go ahead on to Daniel with the KC Star. Daniel, you should be good to go.
I know you guys already got into this, but the potential congressional investigation into what happened. Senator Moran, can you kind of lay out what timeline you're looking at? Obviously, you want to wait for the NTSB, but, you know, are we looking at months? Are we looking at a year? And then, I mean, also just kind of the action that might come from it, because, you know, people have been raising complaints about close calls at airports, and Reagan was already one that was considered pretty crowded. You know, obviously you have to wait for the report, but what type of action would we really be looking at, and how long would we have to wait?
So Congress recently, a year ago, went through the process of reauthorizing the Federal Aviation Administration. A lot of attention was spent by members of Congress in the committee and really across the Senate in trying to make certain that the laws that reauthorize the FAA appropriately were being reauthorized, and that necessary safety steps were being taken. For a long time, we've talked about its seemingly increase in near misses. And a lot of the response that we made as a committee, and we increased, I'm an appropriator as well, we increased by $1 billion the amount of money going to the FAA, but we focused a lot of resources on the ability for air traffic control within the FAA to hire more air traffic controllers, to reduce the stress and the shortage of air traffic controllers, to educate and train more. And I think that is a significant component of where we are already headed in trying to make sure that we have the safest and continue to have the safest air system in the world. I would say that the committee already Roger, Senator Marshall, and I have met with Senator Cruz, the chairman of the Full Commerce Committee, and with Maria Cantwell, the Democratic ranking member of that committee. We did so this morning. And so already the conversations are beginning about what it is that the committee can do to, again, examine the circumstances of this particular tragedy and what it means for something else that should be done to increase safety. And so the facts matter. NTSB will be the original provider of facts, but I also know that our committee, our subcommittee, will be looking for other experts and other witnesses, others involved in the safety system of our air system, to try to make sure that we have all the information necessary and make sure that whatever problems are brought to our attention are remedied. And so again, we'll see what the facts are. The earlier question was about the Black Hawk helicopter, and we'll see whether there was a problem that I think it's easy to reach the conclusion that just common sense would say, why are military aircraft, particularly helicopters, training in the area of Reagan National Airport? We'll find out what the answer is. Why is that? And why is it happening today? And whether or not it should continue. Common sense says that's something we ought to be taking a serious look at. And then the ability to communicate, as Senator Marshall says, we want to make sure that there is. So what I know about that is that there is the technology for aircraft to communicate with each other automatically. There are exemptions to aircraft having to have that, and one of the exemptions authorized by the FAA is that military aircraft are not required to have that because of the secret and national security aspects particularly here in Washington, D.C., of the missions of those aircraft. That needs to be examined and will be.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and go to Lucky from Ad Astra. Lucky, you should be on.
Okay, for both of you, there are some very complicated situations involving the airspace around DCA. Notably, there is a airspace prohibition, in fact, that is just to the north of the airport, which includes the Capitol, the White House, and such. And how does this all tie into all of the situations that the congestion is being dealt with at DCA?
Well, Lucky, I think it's a very complicated situation. All that's complicated. But in the meanwhile, I'm glad that we've frozen the helicopter flights around DCA. It is a dangerous world right now, and we'll continue to look at it as well. It's challenging. All those are great points.
Thank you. We will now go to Callie from WIBW. Callie, you go ahead.
Good morning, Senators. I was just wondering if you guys had any information about any Kansans potentially on that flight, as well as any additional information about whether or not this is still a rescue and recovery operation, or if any reports had come out confirming that all people involved had passed away.
Well, sadly, the announcement this morning is that it is shifted to a recovery, that there are no known survivors of this crash, either in the military craft or in the CRJ 700. And I guess, tell me the second part of your question.
Sorry, I was curious if you guys had any information regarding any Kansans potentially on that flight.
And I think we're certain there are Kansans. The flight boarded in Wichita. Most of the information there that we've not seen a passenger list, and the efforts at the moment are to notify family members. And so we won't have information, rightfully so, about the number of Kansans or particularly names of Kansans until the family members have been notified. That's taking place. It started last night and continues throughout the day. And we've been monitoring our folks back home. I would tell you that in many instances, people have let us know that they've checked and nobody from their company or no one in their family was on that flight. But Senator Marshall and I both fly on this flight to Washington, D.C. We know the nature of the flight, who's on the plane, and there's no question but what all of us are going to know Kansans who've experienced a tragedy. We'll know them personally, know their family members, or know where they work. And so this is a very personal thing, and we've been explaining to people here in Washington, D.C. the nature of care and compassion and concern, and how we're neighbors in our state. We're certainly neighbors in Wichita, and unfortunately we're going to continue to receive some pretty damaging and sad and serious news.
Yeah, I could just add, I think that's when we're going to get a second gut punch. Right now, we don't know who those people are, but when there's names and faces, and these will be people we know. We get on a plane in an afternoon out of Wichita, and we know 3/4 of the people on the plane, but they've not given us any names yet. I think by the end of the day, we'll have some names, and we've told American Airlines multiple times we're ready to go meet with those family members. And I know Ron Estes back in Wichita is trying to reach out to family members as well. So
I did make a suggestion to the folks at FAA and the folks at NTSB. This may be more of an issue for American Airlines, but it seems that the information and grieving, the counseling circumstances are available here in Washington, D.C. It seems to me that it'd be beneficial to many if that opportunity existed back home in Kansas. And we'll continue to pursue that idea and see if we can't get help on the ground. I know I've seen what has happened at the airport and the prayer service that's taking place in Wichita this afternoon. And we know that there are people caring for others in our hometowns. But if there's some opportunity for the formal opportunity for this process to occur, makes more sense to have the opportunity not only in Washington D.C. but also in Kansas.
Yeah. Just in one quick last point, probably my biggest disappointment last night is one of the main reasons we went out there was I assumed there would be Kansan families there and friends, and we weren't allowed to see them. I think that's something else we'll try to work on our protocol. There wasn't a chaplain for these people, and I think having their representative, you go to you're flying in the nation's capital, it would have been good for us to be able to interact with any family that they did have, but here we are.
I think you're going to lose us in just a few minutes, so maybe one more question.
We'll go ahead and go to Jason from Topeka Capital Journal. Jason, do you have a question?
Jason gave up before we did.
Okay. Jason, you on?
Well, thank you all very much. Thanks for covering this tragedy. Thanks for helping us provide information, what we know. We wish we knew more. And we'll continue to try to make certain that you and Kansans who read or watch or listen to you know what we can provide. And again, express my genuine condolences and concern. And this is certainly a Kansas time for us to come together and try to care for those who are suffering. It's such a difficult time.
Amen. That's true.
You're welcome.
Thank you.